This week's episode of the Rural Woman Podcast is brought to you by the patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast. This amazing group of individuals contribute financially to the Rural Woman Podcast to ensure the stories of women in agriculture hit your earbuds each and every week. Want to join them in supporting the stories of women in agriculture while getting access to extended episodes, patron-only episodes, and other great perks? Head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more about how you can become a patron through Patreon. Hi, I'm Caitlin Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman Podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman Podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Rural Woman Podcast. Today you'll meet Katharine Parry. Katharine is a multi-passionate woman who wears many hats. She is a storyteller and a writer, farmer, insurance professional, and along with her husband, Evan, operates several businesses, including an 81-acre farm. Beyond these roles, her most rewarding title is being a mother of their 2 young children. Before we get to our interview today with Katharine, let's take a stroll down memory lane. Who remembers what a trip 2020 was? Or is it too soon? The following folks took a chance on me over on Patreon all the way back then and have been supporting the show ever since. Marina, Katrina, Laura, Sarah H., and Suzette. I want to say a big thank you for celebrating the incredible stories of women in agriculture right alongside me. We could not do it here at the Rural Woman Podcast without you. If you would like your name added to this list of supporters of the show, you can head on over to patreon.com/the Rural Woman Podcast or today's show notes to learn more about how you can support the show through Patreon. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's episode with Katharine. Kat, welcome to the Rural Woman Podcast. How are you today?
I'm great, Caitlin. Thanks for having me here today.
I am so excited to get to know you better and to deep dive into your story and share it because I have a feeling we're a little bit of a kindred spirit in some regards. So for the folks who are unfamiliar with you and your story, Kat, tell us who you are, where you're from, and how you got your start in agriculture.
Absolutely. So my name is Katharine Parry. I also go by Kat as well. Either or is fine. I was raised on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And if you're from Maryland, you know there's a big difference between the Western Shore and the Eastern Shore. The Eastern Shore is much more rural. My husband and I moved to Delaware, and we have an 80-acre farm. And I got my start into agriculture initially when we purchased our farm back in 2015. I really wasn't a very active part of that. My husband ran the day-to-day operations, and we've slowly expanded that into other avenues as well. But I really made the transition back in 2019. I stepped away from my corporate job on a full-time capacity basis and transitioned to being part-time and taking more of a lead role in our farm.
That's incredible. So the differences between the shores, I have to tell you, I have a sister-in-law that lives in Maryland. We have yet to be able to go and visit her. We're planning a trip very soon. But from my understanding of where she is, like you said, one is very rural and the other one not so much.
Yes, absolutely. She's correct.
So growing up then, you weren't involved in agriculture. What was your understanding of where your food came from?
I would say that still growing up in a rural area, understood, what it was like to be a part of ag. I was involved in like FFA when I was younger in high school, took lots of ag classes to learn more about it. But certainly living on a farm and working on an operation is completely different than I ever could have imagined.
Yeah, for sure. So take us on the journey then of you and your husband decided that farming was going to be for you. Did he grow up in agriculture?
He did, yes. And
Okay.
that's actually on both sides of his family. On his mom's side of the family, they primarily had a grain farm, which is actually still in the hands of his uncle today. And then on his dad's side of the family, they moved down from Pennsylvania and had a dairy farm. They sold that when my husband was probably about 8 or 9 years old. But he has other aunts and uncles that have been involved in raising poultry. His uncle was an ag extension officer as well. So still really deep roots in agriculture on his side.
For sure. So what made you decide to move to Delaware? Was that a place that you wanted to move, or was that just where there was land available to purchase?
Yeah, it just happened to be where there was land available to purchase at the right price, right acreage for us. And the area that we live in, it's very close to the Maryland Delaware line. So
Okay.
not too far for us at all.
So take us back to 2015 of transitioning to moving from your life in a town or a city to moving to your new farm in Delaware.
Yeah, so we didn't initially move there in 2015. There was already a house on our farm. We rented that out and remained in our house there. We actually most recently built our dream home on the farm last year. We were able to move in last May. So we didn't live on the farm initially when starting that.
So what are you growing and raising on your farm?
Yeah, so we have quite a variety here. We raise poultry, and that's on a large scale. We have 6 poultry houses, and those birds are raised for meat. And then we also have a herd of cattle. We have at this time, I would say it's approximately 30 to 35 cows. We have both full size registered Herefords as well as miniature Herefords as well. We do grain farming, everything from cutting and baling our own hay to traditional crops, more so corn, soybeans, wheat, things of that nature.
For sure. Take us back to, initially in 2015, like you said, you purchased the farm, but you weren't on the farm. How did you feel like you were involved in that? Or did you feel like you were kind of removed from it still back in the early days?
Yeah, the early days, because I was working off the farm, I certainly felt like I was removed. I handled things like a lot of our finances behind the scenes and some of the decision making, but the day to day was more so my husband at that point in time. And like our poultry houses that we built, it took from 2015 to 2017 before those were completed construction and we were able to place our first flock of chickens as well. So it was quite a gap there, and we had our first daughter in that time frame too.
All of the things are first for you and starting there. That is a lot of stuff. So, from the 2015 to 2019, you are working full time, you are a mom, you are raising your children. What was the caveat that, made you decide that you were going to start to transition away from your corporate job to being more hands-on on the farm?
My husband and I just felt that it was the right time for us to have me transition and understand more of the farm. And thankfully, with my corporate job, they were willing to allow me to continue working part time. I really struggled at that time with my identity as to who I was. I felt like I was losing a part of myself in not being able to, be that working career driven mom I was still, but in a different format now. And actually listening to your podcast at that point in time was really inspiring for me to be able to listen to other women that were going through similar challenges and, just felt like they were kind of imposters at times. That's exactly how I felt. I was like, I'm not a farmer, or I always found myself referring to my husband and I as well. I was scared to kind of check that box that, yes, I'm a farmer now too. I don't have to pay certain dues to be that. So every day that I'm out there and putting forth my best effort, I'm a farmer.
Exactly. And I love that. And that it gives you kind of the nostalgic feeling of, going back to those times. Cause like you said, it's the imposter syndrome of, who you thought you were to transitioning into a whole new space where maybe you don't feel 100% confident in what you're doing. And, there's so many different scenarios where you're like, well, I don't think I know the answer to that. Does that make me a farmer or not? And I'm always curious, as women in this industry, I always kind of take a step back and think, if it was the other way around, and if it was our husbands that were coming onto the farm, would they still have that same imposter syndrome to think like, am I a farmer? Or are they just confident enough to say, well, of course I am. Like, this is my job. This is what I do.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. And I really don't think that they would probably look at it from the same lens that we do. Comparison is such a thief sometimes for us, I think, especially as women.
Yeah, absolutely. So take us back to that initial like transition phase where you were stepping away from your job and you were on the farm more hands-on. What were the tasks that you started to take over doing yourself, and what has your role grown into now on your farm?
Yeah, absolutely. So I continued managing the books for our business as well. I started partaking in the actual physical labor, which I have a huge respect now for, the men and women that do this. I had no idea how much really went into it and how much time is dedicated to it, especially when you're raising livestock. It's a 24/7 job. Like, there are no off hours, just like with being a parent. There are no breaks. So some of the tasks that I started helping with in our poultry houses, doing the daily paperwork that's involved there. And then as far as the manual labor, I mean, that can be everything from setting up, they have box lids that go out in the poultry houses, adjusting water lines. That's something that's done on a daily basis. We have special enrichments that go in the houses as well. So those are things that have to physically be put out and picked back up every single flock. So, helping with all of those things. And now these transitioned, and adding cows to our farm as well. I help with record keeping for them, vaccinations, running them through the chute to check for health, checking on newborn calves too. So lots to it.
Yeah, like you said, there's so many different pieces to it, whether that is the actual physical labor or all of the paperwork that goes along with all of the physical labor that needs to happen. And, one can't happen without the other.
Exactly.
I'm curious if, like, for myself, I know when I left my job, when I gave my notice and I was like, this is what I'm going to do, I know I put a pressure on myself that I needed to learn every single job and I needed to do every single job. I can't tell you exactly when that burnout happened afterwards of knowing like I physically can't do every job or I don't have the mechanical skills to do these bigger in-depth jobs. Was there a time where, you were trying everything and then had to take a step back to think like, whoa, I need to figure out what my strengths are versus doing everything?
Absolutely. I completely agree with that and can relate to that. It was very overwhelming for me at first. And at times it was really a struggle to set aside that my husband and I were colleagues now and walk away and go home in the evening together as well. I was argumentative with him. I didn't understand why certain things were important and maybe why others were not as important for me to be paying attention with. And like you said, just trying to, think well, I have to take it all on. I have to, be able to do all these mechanical skills. I need to drive the tractor. I need to do all the physical labor. That wasn't necessary. And the longer that I've been here now, the more that my husband and I have realized we have to play off of each other's strengths and we need to outsource some things as well because we can't do everything. So that completely leads to burnout for both of us.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you for sharing about, your boss essentially being your husband and going home with them at the end of the day. I think as partners, as people in marriage, it can be really easy to cross the line of, would I actually talk to my boss who was signing my paycheck like this versus this is my husband, having that mutual respect. And like you said, playing off each other's strengths. I had a conversation the other day with Justin about some wheat that we harvested last year. And the people who were grading it and looking at it, they complimented him on how clean it was and how, it wasn't broken and all of these things. And he had said, the reason that it looks like that is because my wife is super patient in a combine. She is willing to go as slow as possible to not damage the wheat. Whereas he's like, I just want to get it done. Right. So knowing whatever your strengths are, my strength, if that combine broke, I can't fix it. He can though. And, I can drive it carefully and slowly and all of these things. So I think it takes a while to figure out what those strengths are and where we fit into these operations that, could function without us, but we bring something special to them, I think.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And it's wonderful when my husband and I have those conversations, just similar to yours, where he admires those certain qualities that I have and the different pieces to the puzzle that I bring to the operation that are different from his perspective. So it's really nice to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So you started sharing your story online of your farm life and transitioning into that. What inspired you to do so?
That would be women that are exactly like you that have had the courage to speak up and share their stories. Other women that are in agriculture, farming, ranching that have a unique perspective as women in these fields. And I feel inspired to speak up because if we don't tell our story, then someone else is going to tell it.
It's interesting. And I very much the same started sharing my story because I saw others doing it. And for me, I've shared this story quite often. Before I got married and before I moved to the farm, I knew I was moving to the farm and I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing when I got there. So I Googled on my lunch break, like, what do women on farms do? Because I saw what my mother in law did. And, I heard the stories of what Justin's Baba did, like, and they were completely different things. So I was like, well, what are people my age doing? Like, what is happening? And I saw these incredible people sharing their stories, and that's how I learned. And then, like you said, we all have our unique perspective of things and how we show up. I'm curious, looking back from when you started sharing your story, is there anything you would have done differently to where you are now?
I would have to say, I think maybe initially I focused more on sharing agricultural facts. I think that I would change that and really just start being more authentic from the get go, sharing my journey and how I got here. And like we mentioned before, some of the things that I struggled with transitioning to the farm, trying to find my place. I wish that I had been a little more open about those things initially, because I think that they can help other women as well that may be in a similar situation.
Right. And I couldn't agree more with that answer. I know when I started sharing my story, I felt like I needed to be almost educational. Like, these are the things that I'm learning, and this is what I can teach you. But at the end of the day, if somebody learned something from what I've shared, that's great. But I'm not a teacher. And like you said, we have to share our stories because if we don't, then somebody else will. But nobody knows our stories quite like we do. And being authentic and being vulnerable to share the things that are hard
and the things that we screwed up on, those are the things that I've learned the most from anybody. And I've learned the most from myself being able to share those things and saying, yeah, we're not all perfect. Don't let the squares or the stories on Instagram tell you any different. Like, we screw up livestock, dead stock, like we have crops that fail, like we have all of these things. And that's just kind of a normal part of farming. And the more that we normalize these things, I think the easier it is for people to relate with us and also feel comfortable enough to share their stories.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Hey, small business owners, are you feeling overwhelmed by the countless ways to advertise your brand online? Me too. A powerful tool that you might be overlooking: Pinterest. Did you know that Pinterest is the third largest search engine right behind Google and YouTube? With 500 million people using Pinterest every month, it's a goldmine for small business owners like us. Whether you're looking to drive more traffic to your website, grow your email list, or increase product sales, Pinterest can help you achieve your goals. Shireen from Pinning by Bad Gringa is an experienced Pinterest strategist and an avid woman in agriculture who is passionate about helping small business owners like us unlock the full potential of Pinterest. Pinterest is a visual discovery engine. It's perfect for showcasing your products and driving targeted traffic to your website, and Shireen is here to guide you every step of the way. With Shireen's expertise, you'll learn how to create effective Pinterest strategies tailored to your business needs, from increasing website traffic to growing your email list and boosting sales. Don't miss out on the opportunity to transform your marketing strategy with Pinterest. Visit the link in today's show notes and start leveraging the power of Pinterest to grow your business. Pinning by Bad Gringa, helping women in agriculture and small business owners succeed with Pinterest.
So through sharing your story, I read some of your blogs. They're incredibly well written. You're also kind of transitioning into wearing another new hat in your journey. Can you tell us about the book that you have coming out?
Yes, yeah, I'm really excited about this project. I was asked by my former coach that I did some mentoring with a few years ago, back in 2019, actually, when I was transitioning to life on the farm and having a more active role. She really helped me work through some of the issues and struggles that I was facing at that point in time. And she asked me to partake in a co-author project. The book is called Radical Courage. So there are several other women authors with their unique, inspiring stories. And I am just honored to partake in that. I have a chapter and I talk a little bit about my journey to the farm and the things that I had to overcome in my life. So yeah, it's going to be published here within the next few weeks and available for purchase. So I'm thrilled for that.
Amazing. Well, we'll make sure that we put the link in the show notes so people can find it and read more about your story. I'm curious, what was the decision behind hiring a coach at that time for you?
Like I said, I really just struggled with things like imposter syndrome, just not knowing who I was anymore. I think I've always been a really strong person and had a solid foundation, and coming home completely shook that up for me. And it really couldn't have come at a better point in time as well, because, soon after that, we had COVID, and I was really able to cope through anxiety. And I think at that point in time, I even had a touch of postpartum depression still from having my daughter. That's a life-changing event in itself as well. So
For sure. I always have the utmost respect for people who have the capacity and the wherewithal to know that what they're feeling isn't okay, that they need that help. And whether it's through coaching or counseling or having a trusted confidant that you can talk to, saying, like, the way that I'm feeling isn't right and it's not sitting right with me. What can I do to improve this? Because, as we know, if we're not okay, then we can't show up for others and be the support that they need.
absolutely, I completely agree with you. And, it's just made me a better person for being honest and being vulnerable about that. I think, like you said, I can show up now as a better wife, as a better employee, as a better farmer, a better mother in all capacities of my life because I'm willing to be honest and vulnerable with myself and sort that out and find the tools to help manage those areas in my life.
Yeah, for sure. So you had mentioned that you and your husband had recently built your dream home on the farm. Tell us more about that and what that was like. Are you in the home now?
Yeah, we are in our home now. We were able to move in last May, actually right around my birthday. So that was the best birthday present a girl could ask for, something that we had dreamed of for so long. And we started that process not that long after I became pregnant with our second child, our son. We decided, hey, we need a bigger house. So we need to go for it. And, so we were able to work with our fabulous lender and make that happen. And we could not be more thrilled and excited to be here. It was certainly a process. Neither one of us had ever built a home before. So very exciting, lots of decision making. We spent probably, I would say, about 6.5 hours at the design studio with our builder, picking out absolutely everything. More than I could have ever imagined.
Right. That is a whole different podcast in itself. How do you build a home with your spouse? Because if anybody's done any type of renovation or built a piece of IKEA furniture, like you'll know if you are meant to be with that person or not.
Absolutely. It's funny though, because my husband and I actually have really similar tastes. Like even prior when we were younger and we would talk about our dream homes, because we've been together since I was 18 and he was 19. So for almost 20 years now. So really long time. And, back when we used to talk about those things, we always had like a very similar idea of what it is that we both wanted. So it was definitely a huge undertaking to do that, certainly with 2 children too.
For sure. So tell us about life on the farm now. You are living there, you are raising your children there. What are some of your favorite memories of being there for the last year with your kids?
I mean, gosh, I love simple moments, just being able to take our kids out to our cows. They enjoy seeing them, feeding them. Daughter is just about 8 years old, and she absolutely loves helping both of us with all sorts of different tasks, from running our cows through the chute to, going and doing a check on chickens. It's wonderful. We love being here and they enjoy being able to go out and do that. We ride around on our golf carts and our 4-wheelers and it's just wide open spaces.
Right. Well, and just lovely to be outside as a family. There are folks who dream of having that opportunity, and for you to be taking advantage, the full advantage of it is always great. Kat, I'm curious for the folks who are listening who were maybe like us back in 2019 or 2017, whenever it was, looking to make that leap from leaving the comforts of what they know, whether, that's a job or a home, and taking that big leap into that next step of, starting a new job, going full time on their farm. What advice do you have for them?
My advice would be to bet on yourself. I think you would be pleasantly surprised when you do, and that you are far more capable of doing hard things than you give yourself credit for.
I love that. Bet on yourself.
Thank you.
How often do we take bets against ourselves?
Yeah, all the time, unfortunately.
Right? And we should be the advocates for ourselves because we're the advocates for everyone else, and we deserve the same respect, if not more. So I love that. Bet on yourself. That is great advice. So what is next for you, Kat, on the farm, in life, all of the things?
Yeah, so like I said before, really excited about the book being published. I actually have also written a children's book as well. I would like to go about publishing that as well, and that is agricultural related, a children's book all about ag. So I look forward to hopefully self-publishing that here within maybe the next year or so. So I'm really excited about that. And, just continue to focus on our family, our farm, making sure that it's a successful operation.
For sure. Well, we're going to keep an eye on you for that children's book because that is also super exciting. And I can't thank you enough for sharing your story with us here today. My last question for you is, what is the most rewarding part about being a rural woman for you?
I would have to say that the most rewarding part is being able to raise my children on this beautiful land and being able to have those memories with them and my husband. That's the most rewarding part for me.
All of the good stuff. Kat, for the folks who would like to follow you online, where can they find you?
So I'm on a couple different platforms. I'm on Instagram, Everly Acres, Everly. And I'm also on Facebook, again, under Everly Acres. My website and blog is everlyacres.com.
Perfect. And I will link all of those in the show notes. And when the book is published, we will link that as well, so people can find you and connect with you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me here today.
Thanks, Kat. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer, and admin support from Kim & Co. Online. A special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre and Carrie Munven from Laystone Farms. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story. Did you know that you can get this same great episode of the Rural Woman Podcast ad-free? I get it. Listening to ads during a podcast isn't always my favorite either. But in order to keep the lights and coffee pot on here at the Rural Woman Podcast Studios, they are necessary. I am so grateful to each and every one of my sponsors, but if you yourself would like to skip the ads while supporting the show, consider joining me over on Patreon. Patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast get ad-free episodes starting at Tier 5 on their podcast player of choice each week, plus some other great benefits. Find out more by heading to the link in today's show notes to learn how you can become a patron through Patreon.